and it's good to have you with us. South Korea and the US have reaffirmed their commitment to work towards the denuclearization of North Korea after the Trump administration announced that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was not going to Pyongyang after all. But many questions still remain on how that can be moved forward. We'll talk with a guest on that a bit later, but first we start with the latest headlines brought to you by Devin Whiting at the News Centre. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. Here in South Korea, the government wants to increase the national budget by around a tenth of what it was this year. It hopes the extra money will help kickstart an economy weighed down by high unemployment and a widening wealth gap. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
South Korea's Ministry of Economy and Finance said Tuesday that it wants to actively deal with the country's structural issues and pursue expansionary fiscal measures to boost job creation as well as future innovative growth. It says government spending in 2019 will increase by nearly 10% from this year to $424.2 billion. That's the highest level since 2000, excluding 2009, when South Korea was struggling due to the aftermath of the global financial crisis. The ministry expects next year's gross income to amount to nearly $434 billion, up by some 8% from this year. Despite pursuing expansionary measures, the ministry says it'll likely have a limited impact on South Korea's fiscal balance and government debt due to improvements in the country's tax revenue, which the government tallied at nearly $15 billion in June. The lion's share of next year's budget, around $146.3 billion, is to be injected into boosting the health, welfare, and labor sectors, while nearly $64 billion is set aside for the education sector. The ministry has also increased the amount of state research and development for future core technologies, as well as boosting the platform economy and ecosystem, which depends on the internet, computation, and data. That's been raised to $18.4 billion, up more than $500 million from this year. The Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy says it plans to increase its budget to around $7 billion next year, nearly 12% more than its budget for this year. This, as the ministry is seeking to effectively deal with trade protectionist measures, convert South Korea to safe and clean energy, and strengthen investments for sectors related to innovative growth. The budget proposal is to be submitted to the National Assembly later this week for approval. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And in the proposal, government spending on national defense has also been increased by more than 8% from this year's budget. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Park Ji-won has more details.
The Moon Jae-in administration has decided to allocate about $42 billion next year on the nation's defense budget. It is a whopping 8.2% increase from the previous year. This marks the highest increase rate on the nation's defense budget since 2008, and almost a double of the average annual increase rate of 4.4% seen from 2010 to 2017. The government expects to spend over 13% more than the previous year on developing and improving defense capabilities, such as the acquisition of state-of-the-art weaponry like aircraft and naval destroyers. Included in this category are some $4.5 billion the government expects to spend on establishing its so-called three-axis system, or the South's key three-part military strategy system to counter any North Korean threats, namely the Kill Chain Preemptive Strike System, the Korean Air and Missile Defense System, and the Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation Strategy. A Defense Ministry official told Arirang News that next year's budget for the establishment of the three-axis system has also increased by more than 16.4% year-on-year. The Defense Ministry explains that the increase on defense budget has been outlined to support the Moon administration's defense reform initiative, which aims to modernize and strengthen the nation's military capabilities with active investment in the latest technologies. The budget plan will be submitted to the National Assembly this Friday for parliamentary deliberation. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And the cabinet endorsed that budget for next year this morning in its regular meeting with President Moon. Speaking to his top aides, the president said the administration's three leading economic policies, namely income-led growth, innovative growth, and the Fair Economy Initiative, should all move forward as a package.
그 패러다임에서 벗어나 사람 중심 경제라는 새로운 패러다임으로 위기에 빠진 우리 경제를 되살려야 하는 것이 우리 정부가 떠안은 시대적 사명입니다. 그런 사명감으로 정부는 우리의 경제정책 기조를 자신 있게 흔들림 없이 추진해 주기 바랍니다.
The president then said the higher minimum wage is only part of many other plans to raise household incomes and that he has no intention of dropping any of his key growth initiatives. But he also noted that his policy initiatives could change should it become necessary. In other news, Japan has once again laid false claim to South Korea's easternmost island of Dokdo. The cabinet in Tokyo adopted its annual defense white paper on Tuesday, which wrongly says that Japan has unresolved territorial issues involving the so-called Northern Territories and Korea's Dokdo, which it calls by the name Takeshima. Japan has been making the claim since 2005. Seoul's defense ministry strongly appealed against the statement and urged Japan to immediately correct the phrase and stop making such claims. Seoul's foreign ministry called in the deputy chief of mission at the Japanese embassy, Koichi Mizushima, to lodge a formal complaint. As for North Korea and its nuclear program, the white paper said Japan's view has not changed despite the Kim Jong-un-Donald Trump summit, and it still sees the North's military moves as a threat to Japan and to the international community. South Korea's consumer sentiment is at its lowest level in almost a year and a half. The Bank of Korea says the composite consumer sentiment index for August dropped 1.8 points from the previous month to 99.2 because of weak job data, rising consumer prices, and the U.S.-China trade war. Below 100 means there are more pessimists than optimists. It hasn't been that low since March 2017. The figure for households' economic outlook fell 5 points to 82, and that for the current economic conditions in general fell 7 points. Despite the government's efforts to create more jobs and boost wages, the outlook on job opportunities dropped 2 points to 85. Now we're getting some heavy rain this week in South Korea. The city of Gwangju and the surrounding Jeollanam-do province saw flooding last night and this morning, and there are advisories and warnings in effect elsewhere. Some are likening it to a fall monsoon. Kim Dami has this report.
The most recent typhoon is long gone, but heavy rain is coming down nationwide. The southwestern city of Gwangju got up to 60 millimeters of rain an hour last night, causing drains to overflow in the city center and trees on the side of the street to fall over. There was a flood advisory issued for the city of Daejeon, where several buildings and homes were flooded, but that's now been lifted. Flooded roads also made for a chaotic morning commute. So what has caused this heavy rain? The North Pacific anticyclone, which had been destabilized by Typhoon Solik, is now stable again. On top of that, a tropical cyclone is sending water vapor up from the south, which meets up with cool air and causes these heavy downpours on the Korean peninsula. Some have called this phenomenon a fall monsoon and the start of autumn. But experts explain that this isn't a true fall monsoon because the North Pacific anticyclone has not disappeared yet. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, the heavy rain will last until Thursday nationwide. After that, the air will feel pleasantly cooler, but there will be still days when it gets above 30 degrees Celsius, and we won't get to autumn until early September. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
After President Trump called off his Secretary of State's trip to Pyongyang this week, watchers were left with wondering what this meant towards North Korea's denuclearization. Washington has since now reassured Seoul that it's still fully committed to its pledge, but by hitting the brakes on further talks, it threatens to disrupt further inter-Korean projects and also puts President Moon Jae-in's role under the spotlight. We'll discuss that role further after this report by Kim Hyo-sun.
The top diplomats of South Korea and the U.S. have reaffirmed their commitment to the goal of achieving North Korea's fully verified denuclearization. The U.S. State Department issued a press release on Monday that said Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa spoke over the phone to discuss the next steps of engagement towards Pyongyang. The diplomats also pledged to coordinate closely and share the same view that pressure must continue until North Korea denuclearizes. The State Department urged Pyongyang to keep its promise of denuclearization as committed to by its leader Kim Jong-un during the Singapore summit in June. Explaining that Washington and its allies will be focused on achieving the North's denuclearization, the State Department said it has nothing to add on Pompeo's canceled visit to Pyongyang as of now. While Pompeo's fourth visit to Pyongyang was scheduled, President Trump called it off last Friday. Taking to Twitter, President Trump said he didn't see sufficient progress being made on the Korean peninsula regarding the North's denuclearization, but he wished Kim Jong-un well. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, to discuss the latest developments on North Korea, we have with us Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you for coming in today again.
Thank you.
Now, let's start with a bit more circumstances about how this Pompeo's trip was cancelled. A report in the Washington Post on Monday, citing two unnamed officials, said that Trump and Pompeo decided to cancel the trip to Pyongyang after they received a secret and the described as belligerent letter from a North Korean official, Kim Yong-chol, his senior North Korean official. Now, it's not been confirmed by the White House whether this letter exists, but it seems to be that, all the reports are saying that there was some sort of letter and some sort of correspondence between the two sides. What could have been in that letter that caused Trump and Pompeo to react this way? And, why would Pyongyang take such a hardline stance?
Well, seriously, it's not easy to know what has been in the letter. Maybe I can guess that the North Korea has continuously argued that the declaration to end the Korean War should be the first given by the states to North Korea before North Korea takes some initial steps to denuclearize itself. So maybe that kinds of same stances might have been repeated in the letter, kind of making, Pompeo's visit kind of fruitless. And a hardline stance, might have, talked about some of the, U.S. stances that has been, contained in the, current, the Defense Authorization Act, in which there have been some measures to increase its defense postures in Northeast Asia. So I think these kinds of military capability of the United States being bolstered, this reason I think might have been some kinds of threat to North Korea. And also declaration of the end of the Korean War kind of implies that the U.S. is giving up its military option to North Korea. So that kinds of things, the U.S. is continuously, operating its military option on North Korea. I think that kind of thing might have been something that made the tone of the letter kind of angry to deliver to President Trump.
Well, despite this letter, the U.S. State Department confirmed that the conversation that they had between Pompeo and Seoul's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa did take place, and that they reaffirmed their commitment to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Does this suggest that at least, despite this letter, despite Pompeo's trip being cancelled, they are still open to trying to engage with North Korea?
The security advisor Jung Ryong mentioned that the North Korea-U.S. would continue their negotiations, resume negotiations soon. So I think the U.S. and South Korea, the foreign ministers, they had telephone calls, and I think they reaffirmed about the continuations of the deal between North Korea and the United States. In fact, the U.S. policy towards Northeast Asia is implying that it would not break up the frames of negotiation with North Korea. Its focus has been moved to bashing China. And in order to bash China, I think the U.S. intends to embrace North Korea, kind of keep the frame to talk with North Korea. So I think even though there would be, very good, speedy, outcome out of the negotiation frame with North Korea, I don't think the U.S. would easily break up the frame. Just keep the frame and keep the channels with North Korea, so that that kind of channels, when U.S. bashes China, would work as very good frames and basis that would enable decoupling between North Korea and China.
Now, this kind of play by the Trump administration, it's not the first time it's happened. In May, just before the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, President Trump threatened to, well, he didn't threaten, he pulled out of the summit that they had planned. But back then, within a few hours, Pyongyang released a statement in their state media, an unprecedented statement, because it was quite pleading in its tone towards the U.S. to say, let's keep this summit going. This time, there hasn't been any response from North Korea. Why do you think that is?
Well, the situation is different. At that time, when the frame is broken, when the summit meeting in Singapore is not undertaken, that would give such a tremendous damage to North Korea. But this time the frame is on. I mean, they would not break the frame fundamentally. I don't think so. It's a matter of whether North Korea, takes the initial steps to denuclearize itself, which is a big burden to North Korea. I think one of the purposes of North Korea now is not to jump into the initial steps to denuclearize itself, but just drag in as much as it can, but get as much as it can from the United States. So maybe North Korea is kind of taking a look at how the U.S. and China and South Korea is moving, and especially what will be the Chinese response to the U.S. bash on China, trade war with China, and what would be the U.S. posture toward North Korea. I mean, if North Korea is not willingly break up the frame with North Korea, I mean, North Korea would just wait and see what would be the North Korea's true intentions, and also take a look at what President Moon is doing. I mean, Moon Jae-in is definitely moving to reinitiate the negotiation frame between the United States and North Korea. So I think North Korea would take some time and see how things would go in, and then after that, North Korea would decide their strategy vis-a-vis the United States.
You mentioned President Moon there. In May, when the U.S. and North Korea summit looked like it wasn't going to happen, President Moon Jae-in held a secret summit with Kim Jong-un, which was credited by many people as being an important interventionary step that helped the U.S. and North Korea summit happen again. Do you think President Moon can play that role again with this proposed summit that's meant to be coming up in September?
I think they will communicate with North Korea. I mean, a lot of issues, whether North Korea is willingly give up its nuclear weapons, take that steps to denuclearize itself, whether North Korea is taking South Korea's proposal for the summit meeting, which I think would happen sometime in September, maybe early or mid-September. Then would North Korea and China, how is the thing going on? Is Xi Jinping still visiting North Korea for the September 9th anniversary of the regime establishment? All that kind of things. I think they would continue the conversations and communications, which is an essential part for the South Korea to determine whether South-North summit meeting will be held in September.
You mentioned there the anniversary of the regime's foundation. There was talk that the Inter-Korean summit would happen after that, which is September 9th, so it would happen around mid-September. But now there are also rumors saying that it's because of the situation of the US, it could be pulled in earlier, so to have the first week of September. Do you think that could happen, and does it matter, especially as there are reports that Xi Jinping could still be going to Pyongyang?
Well, the schedule we were thinking was that, okay, Pompeo is visiting Pyongyang, and afterwards, maybe early September, Xi Jinping is visiting Pyongyang. And afterwards, maybe September 12, 13, 14, something like that, there will be North Korea, South Korea summit. And afterwards, end of September, there will be Kim Jong-un visiting Washington, D.C. and New York for the summit meeting with Trump and also speech at the UN General Assembly. That was the optimal scenario we were thinking.
Of course, rumors.
Yeah, but Pompeo is not visiting Pyongyang. Okay, what would be the Xi Jinping's decision? I don't know. If I were Xi Jinping, I would still go there. I mean, Trump, regardless of Xi Jinping's attitude on North Korea, it seems like Trump is deciding to bash China on trade issues, regardless of Korean Peninsula issues. That's something he would do first before he deals with the North Korea issues. So if he doesn't go to Pyongyang, Xi Jinping would give wrong message to Pyongyang that, oh, I'm backing off because of Trump. Kind of the kind of image that, oh, China is weaker than before. I mean, because of Trump, Xi Jinping is backing off. How can I trust China? That kind of message would be given to North Korea. But anyway, if Xi Jinping visits to Pyongyang as scheduled, I think the summit meeting between North and South Korea would be also held as scheduled sometime mid-September. But if it's held earlier, like early September, that means that Xi Jinping is not going to Pyongyang. So I think it all depends upon the Xi Jinping's decision whether he would go to Pyongyang or not.
Interesting. Calendar politics, perhaps. One thing I would also like to mention as well, so within all this, for inter-Korean relations, there's an issue as well, because the two Koreas agreed to open a joint liaison office on north of the border from when they had their last summit. But it's become a bit of an issue with the U.S. And South Korea has now had to come out. The presidential office has said that they're reviewing how to proceed with the proposed joint liaison office it had planned to establish with North Korea. Let me get the wording straight. The spokesperson added, this is not an issue that can be solely decided by our government and is one that needs to be discussed with the North, but we have yet to learn how the North evaluates the changes and conditions. Do you think the joint liaison office can go ahead, or does it now have to be postponed?
Well, I think, North Korea would welcome it because North Korea always wants to boost up the exchanges between North and South Korea to a level in which there will be more and more economically based, exchanges between North and South Koreas, and then lead South Korea so that South Korea would, violate the sanctions. So I don't think North Korea would oppose these kinds of issues. The problem is, okay, what would South Korean government would do? I mean, South Korea has been kind of balanced in dealing with all these issues. They focused on North-South relations and also focused on the U.S.-South Korea, coordination. But it kind of seems like recently South Korean government is kind of, kind of focusing more on the North-South relations. The North Korea and the U.S. Negotiation was kind of stalemated, not proceed smoothly. And South Korean government kind of a little bit, modified its original stance. Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa was saying that, okay, we will focus on the declaration of the end of Korean War first, and so that it would, bring the denuclearization issue further, which has been stalemated. So it seems like the balance between these two issues, denuclearization and the declaration of the end of Korean War, seems like the South Korean government is kind of leaning towards the declaration issue further. So, but now the Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang has been canceled. Then South Korean government, what will South Korea do? I mean, does it have to be balancing back towards the United States position? What does it have to go further so that it will still focus on the North-South relations? Now I think South Korean government have to play an important role as a mediator between North Korea and the United States. And before they go up to back to the rail of negotiation, I don't think South Korea have to do something, haphazardly. I mean, it has to a little bit wait until they go back to the negotiation frame, and then after they resume the negotiation, maybe they can refocus on the North-South relations.
The US has been very reluctant about this liaison office. I mean, why is that? And can South Korea really go ahead with it without the US approval? We need to work together with the US, don't we?
I don't think personally it's not a violation of sanctions. I mean, of course, there will be some oil and some subsidiary economic support to North Korea if we build, liaison office in Kaesong. Of course, definitely there will be some support, economic support would be, accompanied. But that doesn't mean that we are really focusing on the economic issue as a core issue at that time. So, but I think there have been some skepticism from the U.S. side. I mean, U.S. is kind of worrying about what if, South Korean government is speeding up on the side of the, North-South detente more than the denuclearization issues. Of course, there were some issues like South Korean government, companies, importing the North Korean coals to the South Korean territory. So all these kind of, issues are making, United States government kind of, worry about all the behaviors and attitudes and policies of South Korean government, I think.
Well, that's where we end it. Thank you, Professor, for coming in and sharing us your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Now, that brings our show to a close. I'll be back same time tomorrow for more insights and analysis of the day's top stories. Hope you can join us then, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.